Hello, and welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast, powered by Analyst Investors. I'm your host, David Olivencia, co-founder of Analyst Investors, and a passionate advocate for leveraging innovation and technology to drive success. Let's get started. This is Exponential Growth. I also want to give gratitude to Salvi Media. They're the founding sponsor of the podcast. They're a premier executive content agency dedicated to crafting exceptional content and strategies that elevate companies' brands and their executives. They're creators of the Emmy Award-winning CEO series. I think many of you have seen that. We've also featured one of my portfolio companies, Analyst Investors and Hallow, on their CEO series. And they've had in-depth interviews with CEOs talking about their personal journeys and business experience. The CEO series can be found on Cheddar, Entrepreneur Magazine, Reach TV, and really want to thank Salvi Media for their support of the podcast. You can also follow them on social media, as well as they have a podcast studio in Chicago. Join them as well. So again, thank you, Salvi Media, for making this podcast possible. Today we have an exciting guest. Somebody who has deep expertise in what's called the supply chain, how goods go from one entity to another and arrive at your door or arrive at the customer location. He's also a very active member in Analyst Investors, in my angel group, and have come to know him, amazing leader. So please, let's welcome to the podcast, Luis Solana. Luis, welcome.
Thanks for having me, David. Looking forward to the conversation.
We're gonna have a good time here. Also want to give gratitude to Salvi Media. They're the founding sponsor of this podcast. They're the premier executive content agency dedicated to crafting exceptional content and strategies that elevate companies, brands, as well as executive brands. They're the creators of the Emmy Award-winning CEO series that provides in-depth interviews with CEOs, showcasing their personal journey and as well as their business expertise. The CEO series can be found on Cheddar as part of Entrepreneur Magazine and as well as on Reach TV. So I want to thank Salvi for the resources for this podcast. Please reach out to them, follow them on social media. And if you're interested in using their studios right in downtown Chicago to record podcasts, they'd love to have you. Please reach out to them. Excellent. So Luis, amazing career, amazing background that we're going to get into. Let's start out and just tell everyone a little bit about the Luis Solana story.
So probably I should start speaking Spanish. No, probably not. Okay, I'll do it in English. So I'm originally from Mexico. I was born and raised in Mexico. I'm a Gen X. I did I lived in Mexico until I was 27 years old. I had my college degree. I did it there. I went to Universidad Panamericana. I'm an industrial engineer. And little I know that on the last year of college, a company of the name Excel Logistics at the time, which is now DHL Supply Chain, reached out to me, and that's when my career in supply chain started. I grew to the ranks with them. At a certain moment, I had the opportunity to do my MBA in the States. I'm a proven example that Ivy League schools make mistakes. I got accepted to Harvard Business School. I did my degree there. And when I finished, you go to an institution like that and you get a lot of savvy people with money. I decided to play entrepreneur a little bit. I started a company in the Americas, just a marketplace for buying, selling, and leasing industrial assets. It didn't work out. Great second MBA that I did. And at a certain moment, I was in the option of continuing with DHL supply chain in Mexico or doing something else. At a certain moment, Colgate-Palmolive ran into me. I had spent some time with them during my MBA in Europe and in Africa, from all places. And I joined them. I started managing their supply chain, customer service, logistics, planning, first in Brazil, where I spent 3 years. I'm fully trilingual. That might be a little known fact. Eventually, I came back to the States, managing the US and North America for them, commuting back and forth to New York from Atlanta. a recruiter reached out to me at a certain point, and I joined a completely different industry, a fast-moving consumer goods industry, Coty, which is a fragrance and cosmetics company. Fun fact, I probably one of the best or most educated males that can talk about nail lacquer with any person. I did my career there, managing the America supply chain. Another jump in my career, and I ended up going to Bridgestone, which is what brought me into Nashville, where I live today. With Bridgestone, I was managing a $15 billion supply chain, all the Americas, complex supply chain, multitude of distribution centers, sourcing from multitude of plants globally. I lived COVID while I was in Bridgestone, so I have a lot of appreciation of dealing with complexity in supply chain. Um, a certain moment, my time with them was done, and I spent 2 extra years with a German company, Henkel, from Nashville, managing their North America supply chain. Late 2023, I decided that after 30 years in corporate America, it was enough for me in corporate America, and I wanted to continue using my supply chain expertise, which is my biggest asset probably in the business side, uh, but in different, more as an investor than as an operator. So with that, I went a little bit back to school to educate myself on private equity, venture capital. Today, I work as an advisor for a couple of private equities and a couple of their portfolio companies, trying to help them improve gross margin. And little I know, probably over a year ago, I met David, right? I met you. Um, he lured me to start investing as an angel. Then he and Adela convinced me that it was good to start investing in the fund. So I invested in the fund as a limited partner. And the more time I spent with Angeles, the more I liked investing. And my passion today is investing of anything in supply chain technology. And that's probably my career just on a succinct way. On the personal side, I'm uh, I'm married. I just made 30 years married, and I'm an empty nester. I have two daughters, both of them grown women, and both of them successful early career women. So I'm a proud dad as well. So
Wow, no, amazing career trajectory, right? All the different companies, global perspective, Harvard MBA, right? That comes out of that. And the one thing I just highlighted though is, you said, hey, I got a second MBA, right? I took some risk, right? A lot of people are very scared, to do anything that's risky that can put them out there and expose you. Say, and you went out and you went out for the marketplace for industrial goods. I think you mentioned, right, and gave it a shot. Didn't work. And some of those, maybe a couple of your quick thoughts on that is just like, what were your key learnings from that, right? I mean, do you have any key learnings you want to share from that, taking that risk?
it was, yeah, it was painful. It was. I will never regret decisions that I made in the past. I always take them as a learning opportunity, and you learn from your decisions. I won't call them mistakes. I was convinced it was a great solution. At the end, things unfolded. The wave turned on me on the thinking this was 2001 when all the internet boom. So we were
Gosh,
banking
yeah.
on some of that happening in the industry we're playing. It didn't happen as we expected. Probably we spent a little bit too much faster than we should, some of the cash that we had in some trying to grow faster. And long story short, but one of the biggest lessons in my career has been, I still remember with my two partners that night that we sat down and we said, to want to, we had an offer to invest and buy part of the company, but at that time we had lost faith on our business model. And by that time, after a couple of drinks, we decided that it was time to call it quits, and we closed the venue. We had 30 people in 4 countries. We went through all the process of that, and at the end, other than the venture capital that went into it, we didn't owe anything to anyone. It was a risk capital, friends and family, and others. But the great, a lot of scars, but great learning. You learn, you learn a lot about not successes. And I use that every time that I decide and I make anything. Probably has making me more diligent on assessing the ups and pros and cons of anything that I do, whether it's an investment, whether it's even personal decisions. I'm more diligent on that. Probably that builds some character in me. So.
Oh yeah, no, they do. Look, and every successful person has had many mistakes and learnings. We can call them mistakes, but just things that you learn from. No, thanks for sharing that. So, Exponential Growth Podcast, we like to talk about trends that are growing exponentially, and then provide our listeners with just insights on where's this exponential growth happening and how do they best think about it and prepare. We bring on great speakers like yourself to share unique perspectives on that. So from your viewpoint, what should our listeners be thinking about as an exponential growth trend in tech and be aware of? What are the top couple areas that they should be thinking through?
Mhm. I think the obvious ones are the ones that everyone talks about, right? Fintech, healthcare tech, those are happening and definitely they're important waves. To me, they're not as sexy to be as others. So to me, I refer back to my strength, which is the supply chain. So I think on the supply chain space, there's a lot of opportunity to invest and grow. Let me calibrate just to your audience a little bit of what I mean by supply chain, right? Because people might speak differently. To me, it's the end-to-end. And I always compartmentalize in four different buckets: the planning, the purchasing, the making or manufacturing, and the delivery logistics component of it. Each of them is a bucket within itself, and each of them has an end-to-end planning as an example. There's supply planning, demand planning, manufacturing scheduling, transportation planning. You can go on and on and on. Each of them has its uniqueness, its complexities, its core knowledge that you need to have to manage. But at the end, all of them are intertwined. And for you and me, when we buy something or as a company buy something, you want to have an end-to-end integration of your supply chain. From the moment that you decide, even from the moment you start doing the research and development process of a component that is going to be part of your plant, then how you plan the forecast, how you schedule it in the line, how you produce it, how you store it in your warehouse, how you deliver, how you provide service to your customers, or how you move it even to retail if you want to go to the extreme. Everything has to be cobbled together and intertwined. And that to me is interesting, and I see a lot of different opportunities to make that end-to-end process stronger, especially with technology nowadays, which I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more in a second about technology, right? So, but technology is an enabler to do that better. That's why any investment in innovation or alignment or agility in a supply chain, to me, it's interesting to evaluate as it improves processes. And the end, there's three dimensions, right? Lower cost, better service, or lower inventory capital investment in that venue, right? So
Yeah, no, I like the way you laid that out in the four buckets and you think about they are amazingly complex, but you think about if you have company A has a supply chain of goods, their competitor, company B, has a supply chain to get their goods out. And the company that has the most efficient supply chain over time, how you better plan and manage, how you better manage inventory, how you better ship goods, how you follow it all the way through the end customer, that company is going to win over time. And which is why it's such a vital part. And there's so many things involved in the complexity of these things, the cars, trains, planes, to move goods, inventories are moving very fast, right? And then how you plan for this stuff, right? Dynamic planning, dynamic practice. There's so many things involved. It's a really exciting space that is really just, I mean, and technology is a major component of it, right?
yeah, absolutely. And in technology, you need to follow the trends. And I'm not inventing these trends. I think anybody with some supply chain background will agree directionally that there are three major mega trends happening in the supply chain space nowadays. We can call them differently, bucket them different, but there are three big mega trends. One is around automation and digitization. So simplistically speaking, anything that is aimed to align a process to improve the downstream impact of that process. Think purchasing. How do I optimize my purchasing process so I get better per unit cost or lower minimal order quantities that I can order less and invest less money. And the second component on digitization is the obvious one, which is robotics and autonomous material handling systems. Anything that is use that mechanization smartly, calling mechanization anything, non-human aid mechanics, robotics, or autonomous vehicles to just manage that disruption, that supply chain, right? So one bucket is automation and digitization. The second one is where's my stuff? So visibility and global trade, okay? And on that, all the name of the game is around how do you have the agility and you drive accelerated innovation in your processes to the bottleneck those processes so they move faster. So you deliver faster or you have less wait times, less downtimes in your manufacturing process or in your purchasing process or in your delivery process, less stops on the product flow end to end. The second one is how do you adapt? Because the only thing that you know is supply chains will always change. Today, the flavor of the month is tariffs, but that's just the flavor of the month. They will come and go one day. There's change on suppliers, changing of components that you use to produce certain goods, changing of your recipes that you do to build your products, which country you source from, where your manufacturing location is, changes on the documentation on trade and for trading, transportation routes. I can go on, and labor costs. I can go on and on and on. So you need to be adaptable in that supply chain. So anything that enables visibility and global trade on where's my stuff is the second trend. The third trend is, and they're not in priority. I think the three are big, and the three of them are very relevant. The third one is resiliency and productivity, let's call it. On resiliency, at the end, you need to think that your systems need to be cobbled together as end-to-end platforms so you can create that efficiency to reduce costs, be resilient while you optimize and reduce costs on those end-to-end platforms. And obviously, you need to be effective, not only efficient before, but effective. And by effectiveness, all those advanced analytics that you can use to better use the demand signals that you get so you can not react to disruptions, but really plan ahead of disruptions so you can keep your service, quality, costs, inventory, terms of purchase as efficient and as optimized as possible. So at the end, all these three buckets, there's a lot of investment going on by manufacturers, by supply chain companies trying to optimize these processes. Now, on top of that, as an accelerator, you want to think it on steroids, is the evolution of technologies where with generative AI, where you can really use that data and convert that data faster into insight, into information first. Then those informations convert them into true insights that they can influence how you act on the space. So to me, AI is an enabler. It's definitely cost across all industries, supply chain definitely, but it just accelerates and enables you to do things better, more consistently, more faster. Okay, but at the end, following those three mega trends. So.
Those are some good ones. And the one you were talking about, like the visibility and a bit of the flavor of the month, right? Tariffs are the flavor of the month. And I remember maybe it was it COVID? I'm trying to remember when there was the backlog of the ships, the cargo ships, that they said, oh, now it's cargo ships and you got to wait 30 days, 40 days, the backup there, that was, I don't know if that was 3-4 years ago. I remember ish, maybe 5, I don't know.
End of 2020. I can tell you a small story there because this will bring things to reality. When people talk about COVID disruption, major supply chain disruptions, but the supply chain I was managing at the time with this big tire manufacturer, any given year, we're importing around 15 million tires. 15 million tires, okay?
Where do they import them from mainly?
Maybe half from Asia, a third from Europe, the rest from Latin America, okay? And just do the math. When you think that 50 million tires, you can only put 500 in a container, okay? You're talking at any given time, you have thousands of containers in the ocean, okay? So yes, so I was one of the guys that had a lot of stuff hauled in the ocean, in ports, trying to manage big disruption supply chains. It magnifies when you have something that is so volume heavy that uses a lot of space, a lot of containers. But every company was struggling. It was more visible for companies that had a lot of physical big units stacked along in taking some real estate everywhere, right? So
Yeah, no, that's exactly. So I mean, like, just reemphasizes your point. Like, hey, then there it was, big ships at the ports and containers, right? And now it's tariffs, and there's going to be something else, right? But there'll always be the need, right? Very simply, me is like, hey, I order a pizza from Giordano's, and it's supposed to come at this, your demand, the planning, the scheduling, right? It's supposed to arrive at my house in an hour. An hour and a half passes, it's not at my house, and then you're tracking where the hell's that pizza at, right? And then the customer experience, I'm pissed, right? I'm hangry, right? It's late, my pizza's not come, but it's a bit of it's just like a simple example of supply chain and how you can how you don't get it right or whatever.
I think we all experience supply chain success and failures on a daily basis, right? And it can be your Amazon delivery, it can be your pizza, it can be whatever, right? And a lot of people think more on the last stage, which is the moment of truth when we receive the service. So it's basically the end of the supply chain. But that's just the good or bad service that you receive there is just consequential of a lot of decisions that happen upstream. Do you
That's
have
right.
cheese to do your pizza? Do you have gas in the truck to deliver your Amazon package? So it might sound mundane things, but in reality, there's a lot of other decisions that are made upstream in the supply chain that impact the outcome. So now,
Yeah.
pivoting to the technology side, there's definitely, it's really exciting right now, the moment that we live on with the accelerated technology investments on this space. I think at the end, when I think, on companies that are interesting is anything that goes around strong and innovative founders that really, they really know. Can they answer the question of what supply chain problem are you fixing, right? Because you get a lot of, and you in the role you play, you get a lot of, people aiming to get investment, angel investment, right? And the question, at least in my mind, is always, is your solution really addressing an issue? In my case, a supply chain issue? Yes, no. And if it's not, probably it's just uh, not as needed. I might not have the upside that the investor might want. But if it's really addressing something, then and you have strong founders behind it, that becomes an interesting proposition to think about investing on those startups.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an amazing time, and the startups, the way they're in order to win, right? You got, obviously you got to be attacking a big market, strong founder, and build that traction. But it's also like, how are you leveraging these technologies to win, right? And it's just a key area, and we'll continue to differentiate startups. So when you think about investing, so when you think about your own thesis around investing and looking at these exponential trends and investing, Luis, but maybe also too, when you think about supply chain leaders or companies and they're placing bets, what would you give our audience, some advice, some thoughts on exponential growth areas and how they should best invest or even think about investing in this space with your background and or supply chain, leaders?
So I think you need to answer a couple of very simple questions to just even um, highlight the good investments from the average investments. One is it really solving a supply chain problem? Yes or no? It might sound super simple, but in reality, can the thesis of the founder of the entrepreneur hold five whys? Why are you doing that? And why? Just to get the root cause of what they're trying to solve. Can it hold water? If it holds water, to me, that's 50% of the decision making is there because then they're really addressing a root cause problem that can help a lot of companies. Okay, so that starts being interesting to invest. The second one is, you know, at what stage are they? Do they need, sometimes it's the chicken or the egg, right? In order to prove a thesis, sometimes you need to have certain investment because you need to scale it up before you can test it, right? So you need money to scale it up, but you don't get money until you scale it up. You mean because that's how the money flows to investors, right? So so at a certain moment, you in reality, I don't want to use the word bet, but you make an educated decision as investor on, and in order to make that educated decision, it goes back to, is it solving a problem? Does it have the the other angle is it solving a problem looking in the rear view mirror or looking on the through the windshield, looking forward? Because the problems on the past not necessarily the problems of the future,
Yeah.
and and on top of that, very likely the problems are different. So not the past not always predicts the future. So you need to get that insight, and that's where technology is super interesting on like generative AI, where you can start just generating those experiments that you can convert those info into insights, but those insights are more predictive, not more than reactive to the past, more predictive insights toward the future. So they can really influence the actions that you take and where you invest. So it goes back to, I think I said it briefly, but to me, AI, everybody talks AI, right? But to me, AI is the enabler that can help you just move faster or more efficiently or more proactively towards gaining future insights and trends in the future. If it's just fixing the past to do it faster, simpler, it might be an interesting investment, but it might not be it will not have the upside. I don't think it will have the upside that the ones that are trying to get more predictive in essence or forward looking in essence. So
Yeah, yeah, I think if you're looking, in the past, right, you're not going to change the game. Where you need to leverage AI is looking in the future, scenario planning, trying different things, and it's amazing when you use it for, called strategy conversations, market conversations. What should I do? Scenario analysis. Hey, if this scenario happens, how should I think about it? It's just a phenomenal tool. And look, and we're still very early, the very early innings of artificial intelligence, right? We haven't even scratched the surface of what, AI potentially coupled with quantum computing and how it can do routing and demand planning and even predict the next products and which could be or optimized. There's so much out there in that space.
so you think, a company has a business model, right? Which is the
Yeah.
reason of existing of the company. What are they doing? Why did they establish a company to do what? But then you have an operating model. That operating model should enable the business model. Now, the artificial intelligence or any supply chain technology or any technology should play more on the operating model side because it's where it has to, insert that agility on steroids with technology to create value faster in an amplified way, right? And that's when you shouldn't be changing, from my perspective, the business model. The business model is the business model, but you can change how you operate, what is the operating model, and technology can accelerate, magnify the results for a better result, faster, more value, and that's where technology plays a role in especially in supply chain. So.
Yeah. So no, excellent. So Luis, I want to thank you for sharing your perspectives, your life story, journey, helping us sharpen our knowledge on supply chain, all the amazing things that are happening with supply chain and technology. and a couple of, just different insights and ways to think about the supply chain. Well, two things. What's kind of next for Luis? And then the second part of that is, how do people stay connected with you and follow you on social?
So I'll answer your two questions. Maybe just I want just to give also your audience with a quick thought process about there's also a lot of fear about technology, right? And so probably the way I think it, you know, is a one more revolution in how we do business. It's a new industrial revolution, we want to call it something, which is machines are just pivoting from being tools to being collaborators, co-pilots, co-thinkers, and enablers to manage teams, to manage businesses, and to drive change. So if you fall on that part of, having fear of technology, I would dare you to embrace it because I think it's here to stay. And to me, it's exciting. That's just the way I think. Now, what is next for Luis? I'm spending too much time with you, David, and people in the investment community that at this point in my life and career, investing in supply chain has become more attractive. So I have a couple of plans going on, and I think there's going to be more in the near future coming out of that. But it's an area that, with my expertise, if I surround myself by people with more experience in investment that I have, with people with more experience in technology that I have, I can bring the deep supply chain expertise and just create something good to generate value for potential investors. So that's what comes to my mind about what's next. So regarding living, how to connect me, we're all in LinkedIn, right? So that's the easiest one. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not the one. You'll find me Luis, Luis Solana, Solana. Very simple. And I'm in the process of changing a little bit things. So I'm building a new webpage for myself. So I'm not ready to share it yet, but that will come, and eventually I can share it with this group. But LinkedIn is fine. And David, if you want at the end, if you want to put at the end of the webcast when you do the edition of the podcast, just my email and phone, that's fine as well. So.
Okay, well, great. No, Luis, thanks for sharing that. And on the point of being afraid of technology. Look, I mean, this is why we're doing the podcast, right? So that to give you get you educated on these trends and technology, and so you don't fear that you embrace them. Because I think the alternative, being afraid and not embracing them, puts you at a disadvantage, right? Puts you at a disadvantage in your career, puts you at a disadvantage in your personal life and experience in different things. And so we would like to give you that, give our listeners that expertise and wisdom from leaders like yourself, Luis, and others that have come on. So, Luis, I want to thank you for jumping on the podcast, sharing your perspectives, wishing you tons and tons of success, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, David, for having me, and thanks to your audience for listening me as well. So cheers.
Thank you.